Hello everyone. I'm going to speak today about the ideas of Stephen Krashen on the importance of reading, especially for kids but also adults, and how it can help not just language acquisition but also intelligence in general, right? Because some of the research that he has done, and here I will start with this article, access to books and time to read versus the Common Core state standards and tests. Here he discusses first language reading as well as second language, but mainly first language, and says that even the GPA scores of normal subjects can go up if people read, and that reading more than actually trying to get them to read. And we do this in second language acquisition as well. We give them instruction. Even more than instruction, if you let them read what they like, enjoy the act of reading, have pleasure in reading, they actually learn much better. And I'll start with this article. He first says, now when you say read, and especially in a country like Sri Lanka, we need to say like what? Where do they read? Because especially now, books have become very expensive, and all the books that you see behind me are things that even I have bought much earlier. Where do they have access? And the main point he makes is make use of libraries, either in school, either in the public system, because that can actually mitigate even the effects of poverty, because it gives children access to books if only they are taught to use them, and if only we know to leave children alone to read what they like. So that's basically what his ideas are, and I'll be doing not just this article. He's written something else, and all these are available in his website, SD Krashen, the website, protecting students against the effects of poverty, libraries, that you can actually use libraries to make sure that the students are not penalized by not having enough money to buy books. And I'm speaking like this because I know the Sri Lankan library system is very strong because of the work I do there. And again, there's another article which I'll be referring to, compelling comprehensive input, academic language and school libraries. How we can activate, schools have libraries, and whether we can now get schools to believe in the power of libraries again. And this book that I have been reading, The Power of Reading, I'll be quoting from that as well. All these, the reason this is a photocopy, this is available on his website for free downloading. So please feel free, if you're interested like me in finding out the effects of or the power of reading in the intelligence, in the development of knowledge, intelligence and overall personality of reading, please go to Krashen's website and see what he has said. So starting with access to books, right, he has said the following process presents a simple hypothesis about the development of literacy, the ability to read. That's what you call literacy. First thing, access to books. Do they have it? Secondly, free voluntary reading. Now, the students, we need to make the students like to read, right? So free voluntary reading, not that you force them to read, but you give them a liking to read, leads to literacy development, leads to better reading. Okay, and the reason I'm getting involved in talking about this is he has also drawn very clear comparisons between first and second language reading, and has said second language acquisition is also greatly helped by getting people to read what they like in the target language. Okay, so he says, he starts by breaking down a very commonly found idea that young people don't read. Now, of course, he wrote this particular article in 2013, and 2023, maybe a decade after, things are even more the context is very distracting for students with social media and TikTok or what not. But what he says is, because I listened to his talk very recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, where he spoke at the TESOL conference, he said, contrary to belief, young people do read and they like to read, given that they have access to compelling input, things that they find interesting. right? One of the mistakes we make is we the adults tend to choose what we think kids should read. I mean, of course, when they are babies or very small, yes, you choose. But when they are teenagers, you need to trust them to have enough intelligence to know what they need to read. Okay, and Krashen was saying even comics have a lot to offer. Let them, like, don't try to put your don't try to say don't read this but read that, because what you might be putting a stop to might be the whole reading process itself. So to be careful and trust them. And any good library will be curated. There'll be a librarian, the more credited, the library with more a librarian with more credentials would definitely know what to do. So to trust them, get them to libraries, get them reading, and so that they will know how to choose what they want to read. Right? So he starts by saying young people actually do like to read, and he says this is where teachers can come in. There is no question that activities such as read alouds and discussion of good books can lead to more reading. That reading itself leads to more reading, right? And that suggestions from librarians, teachers and others can be helpful. So librarians and parents and teachers can be people who cheer on the process. They can discuss the books the child has read. There can be read aloud, especially like what my friend Suramya and I do at the public library. We read books aloud to kids, especially she does it with a lot of activity, a lot of expression, a lot of drama. Those can absorb the interest of a child, who then will be encouraged to read more. So the next subheading that he has here is free voluntary reading, literacy development. And the reason he uses free voluntary reading is to say, trust them to pick what they like and make it almost an adult process. If they don't like the book, let them keep it aside, right? And then pick what they like. So this is where absolutely a library with more than 500 books will help if you have that in school. And studies of sustained silent reading, he says, is important. Students in language, first or second. So first language would be the native tongue. In my case, it's Sinhala. Second language is English. It could be your Tamil, and the second language would be English. Students in language, first or second. Classes that include time set aside for self-selected reading consistently outperform those in similar classes that do not include self-selected reading time on tests of reading. So this is research done where they had said if you give a test on reading where they check writing, spelling, vocabulary and grammar, those who had at least half an hour set aside for silent reading, where the teacher doesn't get involved, they pick what they want and read, outperformed the class that didn't have it in all these aspects that I said, right? So that he uses to bolster his argument here. And then he has also done some case histories where people have from poor backgrounds have actually become successful through the process of reading, and correlational studies where they compared how much people read. The amount of free reading reported is a consistent predictor of scores on test of reading, writing, vocabulary, grammar and spelling. So these are the ways in which they check to see how effective reading has been, right? Now this is very important, and I'm an admirer of libraries and librarians, and I know how much work gets done quietly there. Especially because I'm involved in the National Library and the Colombo Public Library, which holds so many free sessions for children, and I myself do my English for Fun project there where we read aloud without any testing or any evaluation being done, because it takes away the anxiety factor in students and they just come there for enjoyment. He says a number of studies confirmed that providing access to books via libraries has a positive impact on reading development, confirming the relationship between the first and third elements in the above hypothesis. That is how you read and all that. Now, he says there has been a study done by PEARLS, that is Progress in International Reading Literary Study, They have done, annually they do tests. He has taken the 2006 results, and these people have looked at 40 countries and had tests in their own mother tongue of maybe 10-year-olds, about 4,000 students each, and they have tested to see how the socio-economic status affects reading, how independent reading time develops their literacy, how school libraries with at least 500 books affects them, and how instructional time where we actually teach reading affects them, right? And of course, the higher the socio-economic status, the better the readers. I mean, that we don't, socio-economic status he defines here as education, life expectancy, and wealth. If you have those three things high, right? In agreement with many other studies, we found that higher the socio-economic status, better performance in reading tests. Because naturally those who are born into privilege have more books, or they can afford more books, and therefore they might be able to access libraries more easy. They outperform those who don't have. Then he says this, school libraries, right? School libraries that have more than 500 books actually help to mitigate, actually help to stop the bad effects of poverty, because those who use school libraries well could perform as much as those who were in higher economic status. This is what he says. This was a strong, this library checking, this was a strong predictor of reading achievement. Of great importance is that this predictor, school library, was nearly as strong as the effect of socio-economic status on reading achievement. That is what I'm saying. Even I can't buy books now, but if we give access to a child to a good library, that can offset your reading achievement. And one of the best examples, and you will find this interview in this channel itself, is Professor Liyanage Amarakirti, who is now a professor, did his PhD in the USA, got a Fulbright. His development of English was totally through a library. He trusted libraries, kept on using them, and developed his language skill as well. So please, none of us, not many of us can afford books now. Get your kids into a library, get them into reading. And I hope the school librarians, if they are listening, would also activate themselves to give free reading time to students, because we are so involved in training them for exams that we forget their real development of intelligence, wisdom, practicality, all that will depend on how much they read. I do wish somebody will think of providing at least half an hour of a school day for the children to go to the library and just read whatever they like. That also means you need to have a good library they can access. And I must say that my PhD research was about post-war fiction, but I spoke, it combined anthropology and fiction literature. So I interviewed about 10 writers on their life stories. One common factor among all of them is every single one of them loved books and used the library. So then, and the last thing, independent reading time. Of course, obviously, those who spent their independent time reading scored better. So for example, if your child can come home and he's given free time, maybe 3 or 4 hours just to pick a book and read, those people perform better on reading. That's kind of obvious. Then the last thing, instructional times. Funnily enough, when you try to teach people to read, the score actually fell down. Because sometimes, when you're children, you don't like instructions very much, and trying to push an agenda can work negatively. The final predictor, instructional time, means the average hours per week devoted to reading instruction in each country. According to our analysis, the effect of instruction was modest and negative. That is, more instruction tended to be related to lower performance on a reading test. Right? So it wasn't enough for a statistical mark to be given, but funnily, the more you try to teach them and kind of force children into reading what you like, it kind of, the achievement fell. And then, of course, he has his whole section on common core testing. This doesn't really apply to us because it's the USA, but it does apply to us because we spend a whole lot of focus, whole lot of attention on exams, right? And he is saying just forget the funding that goes into, you know, organizing these exams. Just put it into libraries and reading, because they will actually learn much better. And he says actually even second language reading, it clearly shows that second language is easily acquired by those who read in the second language, and he's very keen on having bilingual programs put in place. So from this, the power of reading, he says this, right? Evidence confirming that reading in the first language is helpful for second language acquisition comes from the documented success of bilingual programs that provide literacy development and subject matter teaching in the primary language. He says, now, time to time we have discussions in Sri Lanka about what language grade 1 people should be taught in, and people say English medium. But the problem is who teaches. There has to be people who are good at teaching in English, otherwise they won't have a knowledge of the subject and the language, which really doesn't help. But Krashen says, look, you can sort that out by having bilingual reading programs running from young age to kind of adult age, where they read in their native tongue, and if they read better in their native tongue, naturally they become better readers in their second language, because A, you get knowledge of the world if you become a reader, right? Then secondly, there's a pleasure of reading connected to the first language. Therefore, you would love, once you know how pleasurable it is to read, you become better readers in the second language itself, right? And the first thing he says is, obviously, learning to read by reading, it is obviously easier to learn to read a language in what you understand. Thus, it will be easier to learn to read in the primary language. Once the ability to read is acquired, there is good evidence that much of this ability transfers into the second language, even when the writing systems are different. So these are things he says in which we who are trying to teach English in Sri Lanka can learn. You know, first let's make readers out of our students. Let's get them to love reading as a skill, and then all of these transfers can happen. And then in this article where he says compelling comprehension input. Now, Krashen is the one who had said the language acquisition happens best when there is input. Input means where they hear and they read and they get, more than production, how much they receive, so that the brain can activate the language acquisition device. They believed in a device which was specifically concerned with the language in our brains. When it has inputs, it knows what to put in place so that later they can produce, right? And Krashen is the one who had said comprehensible input means I+1. What the intelligence you have, or the knowledge or the competence you have at the moment, +1, just a little bit above, right? And that's the kind of thing I've tried in my English for Fun program. They have audio tracks, English stories, but I've also provided for the lower levels a translation, so that they read the story first and they listen to the audio track, because they kind of know what they are listening. Even if the language is strange to them, they would quietly acquire at least a few words, which is important if you're a child, but I won't talk about that right now. So reading this, getting some points of this article, compelling comprehensible input, academic language and school libraries. I like his 3 stages he has given, where he's talking about how academic language can be acquired. Now, academic language is a little bit above ordinary language, right? All of us, if we write in journals, we have to master that. People who are teaching in universities must know how to read academic language if it's in English. Okay, or right. Even in Sinhala, it's a special Shastriya Bhashavak. It's a special level of language. And he says, and this is very interesting because I get asked the questions, we have campus students coming to campus and they simply don't know how to deal with their textbooks. And now the answer, and I'm very glad Krashen has said this, you can't make a child start reading at the academic language level because it's just too difficult. But you can scaffold the process by first getting him to read what he likes, detective stories, young romances, cartoons, so that, bit by bit he gets there. But if you start at the top, the filters or the obstacles psychologically that you'll put up would be very great. So the answer I have to that, how do you get children to read academic textbook? First, get them to read stuff they like. Put comics in universities if you can. Put romances, like I personally love detective novels. Put those so that it's never going to be a quick process. But if at least you go home and spend an hour reading something you love, your English becomes better. So the first stage in developing academic language competence, for a mother tongue, the first stage is listening to stories and hearing books read aloud. Now that's what we do in the English for Fun program. Please read aloud to your kids when they are very small. For second language acquisition among school-aged and adult language learners, the first stage is usually a language class, ideally one that includes a great deal of compelling, comprehensible input. So one thing that sometimes we forget to do in language classes is to put compelling, interesting stuff for them. That is why I keep jumping onto stories, because love of stories is generally very common to language classes, language through literature, whatever. The second stage for both the first and second language development consists of self-selected recreational reading. Self-selected, recreational, for fun, as leisure. Please put that in place where you get children to enjoy books, and all adults. So our University of Sri Jagadhanapura has an English language zone. It has, storybooks for adults to go and read if they wish. Because no matter how high they read in Sinhala, their levels of English is low, so we have simplified readers. Those are those gorgeous books where, for example, David Copperfield, they would have leveled it. So level 1 might be easier, and you can, go climbing up. The reading is narrow, focusing only on favorite authors and genres and topics of deep interest to the reader. And he gives horror stories, adventure stories, let them read what they like, right? So, popularly chosen recreational reading will not bring apprentice readers to the highest levels of academic competence, academic language competence, but it prepares them to read more demanding texts. It prepares them so that they are not shocked when they go to the high level. Before my PhD or whatever master's, I was surprised at the level I was supposed to read. But it's beautiful to realize that after the PhD, I understand the texts that I found difficult much more easier than I had before, because my practice became better simply because I kept reading. Stage 3 is academic or specialized reading in a chosen area that readers often discover for themselves. So that's the stage 3. A lot of us in campus get really stuck because we start with stage 3. No, the first stage you read aloud, you do activities that make reading not so scary, younger the better. Second, recreational reading, let them choose what they like read, and then get them into specialized reading. So a lot of this, now Krashen has actually used a lot of research where, and again he has a whole section on school libraries, the importance of that. And the third, I will just refer to what he says here, protecting students against poverty, and and what he says is libraries. Libraries can actually protect children, because poverty hurts children, of course. When you don't have enough money, children get affected, and then they don't have access to books. But libraries, and again for this they have, they've given examples. They have shown that libraries can actually offset what poverty takes away from children. And again he says, without spending money on other stuff. Just strengthen the library system of schools, and it will help. And it's very interesting, this power of reading. And again, he's used evidence, and one of these is evidence from Sri Lanka, where a 1995 study had been done. So there is proof to show that reading does help. First, in what we call saksharatava, literacy of anyone, it creates a broader knowledge base for adults to work in rather than completely exam-oriented teaching. It makes them creative, and I'm not like my first talk on the importance of children's literature. I was talking about my ideas, but here I'm talking about the ideas of a leading second language acquisition theorist, Stephen Krashen, and there's multiple references, and you go to his website, he's written over 200 works, I think, books and articles, and he uses proof to show how much reading helps, not just second language acquisition, his general knowledge, his development of his subject knowledge and creativity, and also that this is libraries, especially a good library can offset the disadvantages of poverty as well. So I hope, if you're adults or if you're parents or if you're teachers listening to this, lay your trust in good libraries, lay your trust in books. Any chance you have of getting children access to books, please take it. There are good libraries in the public library system. If you're in or around Colombo, the Colombo Public Library has a absolutely good, superb children's section, and there are almost every weekend workshops being held free of charge. Find it out. National Library is now open for kids membership. Find that out, and wherever you are in Sri Lanka, check out your nearest public library. Check out the library, school library, and if you all are teachers or principals, please strengthen that if possible. In a school, of course, I know you can't do it, but let's hope we can have some access to the ministry where we say give them time to just read. And if you're a parent listening, please do not consider the time a child will look at comics or novels or fiction or just enjoy reading whatever the book is. Give them that chance, because that's a stepping stone to making them readers, and if they become readers, they become extremely powerful. Thank you very much.